Welcome to this video. Today what we're going to do is we're going to go over a confidence interval problem using the StatHelper. As you can see, I'm already in the StatHelper, so let's go take a look at the problem. An engineer is doing a study in a manufacturing setting on the length of paper clips. The sample he collected is in a dataset called paper clips. The experimenter would like to know if we can expect these paper clips to be 6.5 centimeters. Okay, so what we want to try to do here is first we're going to create a normal probability plot to see if the data is normal. We do this because in order to use a t confidence interval, in this case, we're going to need to know that the data is normal. Part B, we want to find a two-sided 95% confidence interval for the mean. Part C, we're going to interpret the confidence interval. In Part D, the question is what would you tell the experimenter in this case about the idea of the paper clips being 6.5 centimeters long? Now, before we go back to the StatHelper, one other thing I want to make sure is clear is when you're doing a confidence interval problem like this for a mean, you could basically do a Z confidence interval or a T confidence interval. Once we know the data is normal, we're going to choose T because typically, since we're giving raw data in a file, that means we really don't know what the variance is. So in those cases, we would choose T over Z. So now let's go back to the StatHelper and run this problem. Okay, we're back. We're in the StatHelper. We're on the welcome page. There's a couple of different things we're going to have to do here. For part A, it asked to see if the data was normal. Now, within the StatHelper, where you're going to do this is you're going to go to descriptive statistics. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create what we call a normal probability plot. And we're also going to look at a p-value for a normality test. Since we're looking at a 95% confidence interval, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the p-value to see if it's greater than 0.05. If it is, then our data is normal and everything's nice and neat. Okay, so let's start. So, of course, the first thing you do is you click the Start button. Our alpha value here, when we're dealing with confidence intervals, you get your alpha by doing 1 minus the confidence level, which in this case was 0.95. So we're going to keep this at 0.05. Now we got to go find our data. We're going to click Browse. Now you're going to come here, find your data. Notice you're going to see everything that comes up is going to be Excel. Okay, the StatHelper right now is set up to only use Excel files. If we come down here, we find paper clips, double click. Notice it uploads. Now what it's going to do is you have the option of choosing a different sheet. You also have the option of choosing a column or a particular variable name within your sheet. Now remember, when you set these things up, your first row in your Excel spreadsheet has to be column labels, and they cannot be numbers. Okay, so we want sheet 1. This is going to be a column for length. Now we're set to click Run. Now what you're going to see here is you're just going to see some different things doing descriptive statistics. There's a work tab where you can go see how all the summary statistics were calculated. You can actually look at the summary statistics. There's some results for outliers. There's other graphs, like if you wanted to see a histogram of the data, if you wanted to see a box plot, you could go and look at those things. We're interested in normal probability plot. Now, what you should notice here is we come down, we find that the p-value is 0.7257, which of course is greater than 0.05, so we're going to conclude that the data does come from a normal distribution. You can also get this by looking at the data on this, what we call a normal probability plot. If it looks like it hugs the line fairly well, then we'll conclude that the data is normal. So in this case, the data is normal and we're going to use a t confidence interval. So now what we're going to do is go back over to the sidebar here, find confidence interval. Okay, we know we're going to create a confidence interval for the mean. We're going to use t. So we come to the top here. We find one mean t, click it. Now again, notice it's similar to what we saw with descriptive statistics. Now we're going to click Start. Okay, the first thing you're going to see here is it's going to ask you what form your data takes. You can choose summarized data or raw data. Summarized data would be used if you knew the sample mean, sample size, standard deviation. Now, since we actually have the data, we're better off using raw data. That way we don't have to worry about rounding errors and things like that. Notice when you choose raw data, your next option is to actually go find the data like what we saw for the descriptive statistics. Before we do that, let's look at what we have here for other options. We've got confidence level, which we're going to keep at 95 because we want a 95% confidence level. We've got type of interval. Notice you can do a two-sided interval, a one-sided lower bound, or a one-sided upper bound. Since we're looking for a two-sided interval, we're going to keep it as two-sided. Now let's go find our data. Click Browse. Again, we're back here. Go and find your paper clips. Click Open. Again, we want Sheet 1. And again, our variable of interest is length. Okay, take a couple minutes if you want. Take a look at this. Make sure you understand how I came about how to fill each of these things in. Stop the video if you need to. So now let's click Run. Okay, now notice we've got some tabs here. We're not going to worry about instructions, description, example. Those are tabs for before we run any data. The first one we've got here is descriptive statistics. It gives you what your sample size, sample mean, etc. Your big hitter, of course, is the work tab. What the work tab does is it shows you the actual work to do the problem to get the confidence interval. This essentially would be what you would input for part B. Okay, so you come down here and we find that the confidence interval is 4.775 to 5.961. If we move on to part C, it asked you to interpret the confidence interval. There's an interpretation tab. We can come here and say we are 95% confident that the true mean is between 4.775 and 5.961. When you start to deal with interpretations, there's two things you need. You need the level of confidence and you need the range. Okay, so we have our level of confidence, which is 95%, and then we have our range, which is 4.775 to 5.961. Okay, so that was the answer to part C. Part D said, how are you going to answer the question? Remember, what the question said was the experimenter wanted the lengths of the paper clips to be around 6.5 centimeters. What we can see here is that we're 95% confident that the mean is actually somewhere between 4.775 and 5.961. So if the experimenter wants to know, do you think that or can we expect the paper clips to be around 6.5 centimeters in terms of the average? The answer is no. And the answer is no because 6.5 is not in the interval. Thank you for watching this video on how to do a confidence interval with the StatHelper.